All right, everyone, welcome back into another NBA prop betting video. We are going to be breaking down all the best bets here for today on Tuesday. Now, I'm going to be covering some PrizePicks underdog fantasy score prop bets that we were getting to start the video because we are getting some pretty massive edges, and I want to start with those before they get bumped, so people that are clicking on this video right away can get some action in on those because we're getting some crazy edges. So let's start there. So the first bet that we need to talk about is going to be Coby White to get over his fantasy score, guys. Between the two sites, this one is off by a decent amount. Okay, underdog has is vastly too low, so this is a bet where you should be placing the over on underdog. I'm assuming that they're going to bump this up, but it's just a question of how much they end up bumping it up. But really, given the matchup here between Atlanta, guys, where it's an extremely high game total, 253.1, and a very close game, and a good matchup for Coby White, I fully expect him to be able to get this over. On average, when he does get the projected minutes here of 33, he averages 36 fantasy points. So this would have maybe been a bet I could have potentially considered on PrizePicks, but it is a bet where I have run out it as a middle because it's just off by too much. Bet both sides of this, but obviously the underdog line is the clearly good side of this bet as it currently sits right now. And then same thing here with another one here, guys, Jalen Williams. Now this one is a bet where I'm probably more getting to the under on underdog rather than, or sorry, the under on PrizePicks rather than the over on underdog. Although, I mean, it's a pretty massive prop line difference. This should not be happening. I am betting both sides of this. And if we look at the game log as well, going against the Spurs, he did have 41 fantasy points in that game there. So he did get the over of the underdog line here, which was this game here on 12-13. Now he's projected for 32 minutes. Probably will end up being a close one, but it is a higher scoring game. 5.5 point spread. We like that because you never know if he's going to get his full allotment of minutes here of 32. So those were two big prop line differences to start the video out with. But guys, as we go on, we're still getting like Julius Randle with a big prop line difference, a bet that I think, again, we could be running out of middle with. I like the under a little bit more on PrizePicks as we are being told to bet. Another one, Wemby to get over his fantasy score or under. Again, another pretty crazy one. Projected for 25 minutes. I think the under on underdog is kind of the better way to go. At the same time, wouldn't it be surprising to see him get the over of 40 even? So another one where we could be running out of middle. I mean, it's insane just how many of these we are getting here today, guys. I fully expect the books to correct these. Karl-Anthony Towns, 47 on PrizePicks, 44.5 on underdog. Another one where it does kind of clearly seem like a middle. Kawhi Leonard, another one where it's off by 3 right now. Another one where with Kawhi, it's probably a decent middle bet. Projected for 32 minutes, a lower scoring game as they all have been for the Clippers. 8-point spread. Projected for 32 minutes. If he does get that or more than that, he probably will get the over. But this is a bet where, again, we should probably be betting on both sides of it. So, guys, I could continue on. There are plenty of these bets. I do like Andrew Nembhard to get over his fantasy score on underdog. That's a bet that I ran out already. It's just crazy that we're getting these many. But I want to start with some of the big ones, and then throughout the video, we'll be touching on some of these other ones where we can begin some action on them as well. And so let's just take a peek at some of the other ones, just looking at it from a underdog perspective, guys. That Jalen Williams one has about a 51.6% chance to hit. We look at some of these other ones here as well. Sharp to get over his fantasy score here is a seemingly pretty good one there. PrizePicks line at 37, so at 34.9, definitely a little bit too low. Coby White, we're going to notice, guys, at 28. This one ends up being definitely too low as well, as I mentioned. Even if he gets bumped, I still think we could get to that over. Kevin Durant to get over his fantasy score of 36 is a somewhat appealing prop bet there as well. So I do think we could begin to some of those ones. Just plenty of big edges here, guys. Just too many. But again, let's jump into the game-by-game breakdown. And so starting out with the first game, we got Brooklyn versus Philly, guys. Game that has a decent blowout risk, 10-point spread in favor of the Sixers, guys, and it's a very low scoring game at 218 total points. With that, I don't think we're really looking at too much from Brooklyn, although one of the best bets that we are currently getting is actually for Brooklyn. And then for Philly, guys, Joel Embiid is currently listed as probable. Okay, so we're expecting him to play Oubre style. Edgecombe, he's kind of an interesting one. Let's see the report on him more specifically. Yeah, if he ends up sitting, maybe that creates some value for us, but I kind of lean towards him probably more sitting with this game being a 10-point spread because they could get away with it. Maxey would just then pick up a little bit of usage. And so that bet that I was referring to was Demon to get over his fantasy score of 20.5 here, guys. About a 52% chance for that one to end up hitting. He does draw a tough matchup and, again, a lower scoring game. It really does depend on the minutes that he gets. Right now, projected for 24 minutes. We do see over the last several games, he's gotten a little bit more run than that. If he does end up getting more minutes, he should be able to get the over, but it's really predicated on that. In the last game against Philly, was able to get to 28 as well. And so, not a terrible one, but also not one that we necessarily need to get to. And that's going to be the case with most of these. Maxey, I mentioned, maybe someone we could look at. He's another one where we're getting a slight prop line difference between the two sites, but not really, but also ends up being a pretty decent over fantasy score bet as well. We notice that he has been someone that has been crushing a lot recently as well. The concern that we have with him is really just going to be that game total, very low scoring game, potential blowout, but he is someone that still does get the minutes. If it is a game that does end up being a blowout, he's going to be part of the reason as to why. In 2 games against Brooklyn thus far, guys, 45.7 and 48.3 fantasy points. So it kind of sits pretty with that one. I think we can get to that over fantasy score if we want to. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the filtered call bets. What we're doing is we're looking at kind of bets where the data is checking all the boxes for a bet for us. And B to get over 22 points. Again, he's currently listed as questionable, projected for 29 minutes though. If he does end up getting that, I could see him getting the over, but not necessarily a bet that I feel like we need to go out of our way to target. We got Man to get under his PRA of 15. Not necessarily a bet again that I feel like we need to get to. Some of these are better traditional sportsbook bets. But now we'll go ahead and jump on into the next game. We got Washington versus Charlotte, guys. So let's see. Is Colin Sexton still going to be out tonight? We'll see. We haven't got an updated injury report for that just yet. We'll see the projected minutes. He is not projected for any minutes, so that typically means that he's probably going to end up sitting there, guys. Kalkbrenner currently listed as day-to-day. Did not play on Monday, so I'm kind of leaning towards him probably playing here as well. For Washington, they are getting a little bit healthy now with Chris Middleton expected back in this game. This actually makes them a little bit more difficult to get to some of these plays. Interesting that we have Marvin Bagley listed as probable. He's been someone that's been out. And then Koulibaly as well listed as questionable. I don't think we're really necessarily going to get any great bets here for this game because, well, we do need some of that injury information. So as it currently sits right now, yeah, these are the best bets and ideal bets, guys, that we are currently getting. Colin to get under 4.5 assists, a bet that I think people could get to, but also not one that we necessarily need to. Kaishan George under 5.5 assists, about a 53% likelihood for that one to hit. I don't want to get to that, guys. It is a close game, not a terrible point spread, and he's just someone that, even with some of these players being back, I probably would still want to get to his over assist, so probably just not get into that bet on either side, PrizePicks or underdog. I don't hate the idea of him to get under his PRA, though, at 26.5 here, and that's specifically because Middleton and some of those other players are going to be back here for Washington, which does take a little bit of usage away from George. That being said, it does kind of increase the likelihood for him to maybe actually get more minutes in the sense that the game's not going to be a blowout, but we don't necessarily know that it could go the other way as well, where with everyone being back healthy, like Middleton, he's going to take some minutes away from Kaishan George as well. So kind of not necessarily any bets that I feel like we need to get to here. Let's just take a peek at what are the best bets currently. And yeah, it doesn't really change much there for me. And so we'll go ahead now and jump on into the Bulls versus the Hawks. And so for the Hawks, they are a little bit banged up still. Nothing too crazy there. And we do look at the Bulls, guys. They are getting healthier now, so that is a little bit of a concern. But overall, we already know that we're getting that decent Kobe White bet. And so, guys, we are currently getting a plus EV bet right now. Okoro to get under 9.5 points and assist has about a 57% chance for that under to hit, which is kind of interesting there. We look at based off his projected minutes. I don't necessarily see it that way. Kind of an interesting bet. Anytime we get a plus EV bet like that, we should be taking it. It just depends on whether or not that bet is really still there. We are seeing fantasy score-wise for Josh Giddey here, guys. Another one where kind of looks pretty appealing. Decent matchup with the game stays close. You would kind of expect him to get the over against Atlanta. Last time had 44.1. So we kind of like that there. Just a decent bet, but on this big slate, I don't know if we necessarily need to get to that. Looking at some of the other bets that we have coming in, not necessarily crazy hazards, although this was a bet that stood out to me, guys, as well. A slight prop line difference between the two sites, underdog and PrizePicks. We know that Jalen Johnson has been someone that has basically been crushing it, guys. I don't mind the idea of getting to his over here. If you're going to bet on it on underdog, 52 Ended up going for 60 against Chicago the last time out. Again, this is a game that we do want to be targeting in some capacity. Kevin Huerter to get over 18.5 for his fantasy score. This is probably one of my favorite ones. And so I think we can actually add that into kind of the bet slits to be pulling in. Let's just take a peek at the filtered call-up bets again there, ideal bets and best bets. And Okoro to get over his PRA is a little bit more of an appealing bet. Interesting there. Projected for 24 minutes against Atlanta last time, 11. I think this is actually a decent side to be on. A slight edge there, 52% chance for that to hit. I don't like that the plus EV bet was telling us to bet on his 100 there for his, what was it, points and whatever it was, points and assists. I like that side a little bit more. Plenty of decent bets here, though. About 50-50 splits with a lot of these. Let's see. Vooch to get 8 rebounds. Don't hate that one against Atlanta. Again, 17 in that game. Projected for 31 minutes. I think we could potentially get to that one. That's another appealing bet. And really, in this game, guys, I think we're going to be pretty good off doing some game stack bets here. So I think the best route to go would be to kind of blindly bet some game stacks. And I think that's the best route. So Vooch over his rebounds, Okoro over his PRA, Huerter for over his fantasy score. You could get Trae Young in there as well because we're getting a decent prop line difference for him. I kind of think that's the way to go. And so like Trae Young, guys, 39 for his fantasy score becomes a much better bet there on underdog to get over his fantasy score of 37.85. Again, against Chicago, the last time out had 47.7. So really like that there. He has been a little bit hit or miss, but that's basically because of his minutes, right? Projected for 31 minutes in this game, which in the last game against Chicago had 34 minutes in that game. So, all in all, this actually ends up being a pretty solid bet there for underdog. All right, so we'll jump into Cleveland versus the Pelicans, guys. So DeJounte Murray out, Herb Jones out. Well, he could actually end up playing this game. He was out last game. This is the back end of a back-to-back here for the Pelicans. So we'll see if we're getting some good bets here. And then for Cleveland, guys, Mobley is still out. Strus is still out. And so we do have Lonzo Ball listed as day-to-day. If he's out, that does kind of pop out Jalen Tyson a little bit. And I don't know, I saw some news about like DeAndre Hunter doing the stupid delete stuff from the Cleveland Cavs off of his Instagram. Don't know if that means anything at all, but I guess worth mentioning. So we'll look at the top prop bets that we are getting here right now. No filters on. So some decent bets overall. Garland under 7.5 assists is kind of a decent bet. 53% likelihood for that bet to hit. But this is a pretty high scoring game. Although it does have a blowout risk, it is a high scoring game. So we kind of like that there. Trey Murphy with his blocks and steals is a little bit interesting to get over 1.5, guys. Again, decently high scoring game. 52% chance for that one to end up hitting. I don't hate it. I could see myself getting to that, but if I am, he's kind of someone I'd rather probably get to for his over fantasy score. We are seeing fears for over his fantasy score, 24.5 for his fantasy score, 51.7% chance for that over to hit. Not a terrible spot there. DeAndre Hunter, again, I don't know what's necessarily going on with him. I just think overall we are getting kind of just correct lines for this game, and so I don't feel like we necessarily need to go out of our way to really target anything. Although Derek Queen, he might draw a little bit more of a difficult matchup, but he is someone that I did notice we were getting a slight prop line difference between the two sites as well, where the underdog line was a little bit too low. And he's someone that, has been playing pretty darn well recently, projected for 30 minutes. And we do see if he does get 30 minutes, guys, he should be able to get that over. The last time he did not get the over, 12-14, he did not get 30 minutes. And so if he does get those minutes in this high scoring game, you kind of would expect him to be more on the over side. Another bet that some people might want to get to would be his over 7.5 rebounds, 51% chance for that one to hit. I really don't mind that bet there as well. So overall, Derek Queen is going to be somewhat appealing to us there. But after that, I would say the rest of the bets here that we are getting in this game are basically correct. I don't necessarily think we're getting massive edges. And that's what we're seeing here as well when we put on the filter callouts. Is that kind of the data points are all agreeing with us. Maybe Queen to get under his assist is the bet that you guys could get to. But again, I don't think we necessarily need to force that. And so now we'll jump on into the Bucks here versus the Pacers. So Giannis is still out, which is annoying. We do got to see what's going on with the starting unit. You had Ryan Rollins not being the starting unit in the last game and actually ended up getting a little bit more run. Or a little bit less run, and that was in favor of AJ Green being back. And then we do look at the Pacers, guys. Jay Huff projected for about 7.4 more minutes, so something to pay attention to there, and that's with Isaiah Jackson potentially sitting in this game, guys. So probably not going to play, and I think that's the assumption that we go with, and so we'll see if we're getting any decent bets for Jay Huff at all. But first, let's start off with those bets where we still have those filters on. Jericho Sims is actually pretty darn interesting here, guys. If he does get the 32 minutes that he's projected to get, I don't mind him to get this over. He is someone that the minutes have been a little bit hit or miss, okay? Let's see, against Indy, have they played recently since Giannis has been out? I don't think so. But in 19 minutes, guys, he was able to get 9 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists. So that's a little bit appealing. In the first match against them, only 5 minutes. So like we don't really care about that. Yeah, if he does get the projected minutes that we have matched, should be able to get that over. But it is very much a guessing game there. Even if he gets 20 minutes, I do like that. But I don't think we actually know what to expect here. But we do like the game log over the last 3 games. So a very interesting bet there. Bobby Portis for his under. I'm kind of indifferent about that. Let's take the filters off and just see all the best bets. But I did want to take a peek at Jay Huff, as I mentioned, because he is someone that should be benefiting in this spot. So maybe him for over 16.5 PRA, projected for 27 minutes. I don't hate that. Let's see what he did last time out against Milwaukee as well. Only 14 minutes. So yeah, we don't really care about that because we know he's expected to see that minutes bump. Maybe him to get over his PRA. His points and assists is really the best bet here, 10.5. Maybe a little bit more appealing there. Then I wouldn't touch his fantasy score just for what that's worth. And then, yeah, Andrew Nembhard, we are getting a decent over bet, I think, for his over fantasy score on underdog there. Again, just a little bit too low, 29.85 there, 6.5. Gets a good matchup, lower scoring game, so we don't like that, guys. And, 1 point spread, we do like that. He does draw a difficult defensive matchup, I actually think, going against Rollins or Kevin Porter Jr., even though the DVP rank doesn't necessarily say that. So probably a bet where I don't know. I think I like it more as a middle. Like if you're going to bet on it, probably just bet both sides of that bet. And that's honestly, I think that's probably why we are seeing decent line differences there. Bobby Portis, 8.5 rebounds for the over, potentially projected for 30 minutes. Don't hate it. Don't love it. I'm actually surprised at the lack of decent bets here that we are getting. And then, yeah, let's just take a peek at AJ Green and then Ryan Rollins, because I do think we're getting a little bit of a stacking opportunity. So we do see, guys, his PRA is at 13.5, and then his fantasy score is at 16.5, which is kind of fascinating to me. It really just depends on if he's hitting his shots or not. If we see 1 for 8, that's terrible in his last game back. Let me take a peek at Ryan Rollins as well, guys. For him, it is the minutes, okay? Last game, 23 minutes. I could argue that's why they lost. If he does get 29 minutes, you kind of would expect him to be able to get this over. But I think the lines that we're just getting on him are seemingly correct as well. So let's go ahead and now jump on into Toronto versus Miami. Another kind of interesting spot here. So Tyler Hero is still out for Miami. And so instantly, you guys probably already know, I like Norman Powell a decent amount, and Hawkes gets a bump, and then so does Ware. Those 3 players get a pretty big bump in their usage and overall production. And then for Toronto, guys, Jakob Poeltl still out for them. And then you also have RJ Barrett still out for them as well. And so we should be getting some slight edges here for both teams. We'll talk about those. And really, one of the toughest parts for me on this slate was kind of figuring out what to do with Bam and his fantasy score, off by about 1.4 between the 2 sites. On underdog, the line is clearly too low. Although if we look at his splits, he has been someone that has been struggling. In the last game against Toronto, did have 36 there. And now this is with Tyler Hero being off the court, and you would expect Bam to get a bump there. But I'm kind of indifferent on that one. Typically I want to attack at prop line difference for that, and especially with the underdog line clearly telling us based off of the data that's too low. I don't know. I'm struggling to get to that one. And then this is one that I actually did end up liking a decent amount for a prop line difference, was Norman Powell for over his fantasy score, specifically on underdog, a 33.75. Okay. At 35, that clearly is too low, a decent prop line difference. And he is someone that should be able to get this over, again, considering the fact that Tyler Hero's out. He does typically get a big bump in his usage, although he's very much shot dependent, guys. He's going to shoot the basketball a lot, not necessarily going to do a lot elsewhere. And I think that's really why we're getting those 2 big prop line differences for those 2. And even when we look at Ware as well, Ware is someone where the underdog line is a little bit higher here, but he has been crushing over the last several of games. And he is someone that you would kind of expect that to continue, assuming that he does get the projected minutes that he's at 26. Now, if we look at the projected minutes adjustments, it is saying that that's a tight line. So, kind of interesting stuff there. And then we look at Brandon Ingram on the other side of this game. Ingram's another one where we are getting a pretty significant prop line difference between the two, 36.2 for his fantasy score on underdog. That is a bet that I went ahead and made already. Hopefully he gets the over. In the last game, guys, didn't necessarily do all too much. Had a few too many turnovers. Only 19 points in that game. You know, if he gets to more of his average, he would be able to get that over there. So that's one that I did get to on underdog. Scotty Barnes, exact same thing, guys, where, you know, underdog line just a little bit too low. Felt pretty comfortable getting to his over as well. And the more I'm looking at this game, the more I'm kind of thinking maybe we do run out some game stacks where we're kind of just taking advantage of the prop line differences. So, like, bet on the unders for Barnes, Ingram, Powell, Bam on PrizePicks, and then betting the overs on underdog. I think that's the way to go. We have a pretty massive slate, and we should be taking advantage of these decent prop line differences that we are getting. And I think that's a route that we can go. Now, overall, I know a lot of people are just wanting some normal bets. You know, Scotty Barnes get over 4.5 assists, not terrible. We'll put the filter back on here with all the players. And yeah, it is a tighter slate in that regard. Andrew Wiggins maybe over 4 assists. Drew Smith for under 12.5 PRA, projected for 17 minutes. If he does get that, sure, I do like the under, but he has been getting a little bit more run. And then the player I did want to mention, Jaquez, guys. Jaquez is, for his over 4 assists, I wouldn't hate that. We'll see other bets that we were getting for him here. And his lines seem to have like settled in a little bit more correctly, especially given the matchup. And it's not necessarily a low scoring game, but not a perfect game. But if he does get us 34 minutes, I do think he would be able to get this over. His fantasy score to me does seem, you know, pretty darn low, but it's also kind of interesting that he's been able to get his PRA, which is not that much higher recently, whereas his fantasy score, he has not been able to get that over. Yeah, I think if I was betting on him, though, it just would be the PRA for his over, maybe over 14.5 points, but it kind of feels a little bit too tight. All right, so we'll continue on, guys. A lot of games to get into, as you guys know. Denver versus Dallas. So for Dallas, let's look at the expected starting lineup. Christie is someone that could be back, and if he is, that does hurt a lot of the bets that we could potentially be getting to. Brandon Williams still listed as day-to-day as well, so just some interesting spots. I think until we get some of those news updates, we're not going to go too crazy. Gafford for under 7.5 points is a plus EV bet right now, projected for 22 minutes, which would be a little bit of an increase from what we have seen and get recently. And we do see that if he does get those 22 minutes, that he would get the over. So based off of the DVP, would probably get closer to 9.4. Based off of his average, closer to about 8.2. Still, it's a plus EV bet. If that bet is still there by the time you guys are watching this video, probably should still get to it. Christie for over 7.5 points is very interesting. Again, projected for 24 minutes. If that ends up being correct, maybe we like it. I just don't think we want to mess with him, honestly. And that's kind of my feeling for this whole game. I mean, I am a sucker for PJ Washington, 13.5 points maybe. In the last game, guys, did not necessarily shoot the basketball too well. 3 for 7, guys, 28 minutes. This game is not too bad in terms of the point total. 7-point spread, we were about to blow it a little bit, but if he does get 32 minutes, him to get over 13.5 points, I wouldn't hate. But I feel like just the lines that we're getting here are just seemingly correct. So we'll jump now into the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the New York Knicks, guys. An 8-point spread in favor of Minnesota. 228 is the game total for New York. We are getting, I would say, some pretty interesting spots. So Tyler Kolek is someone that should pick up a lot of usage, as well as Jordan Clarkson tonight, with OG potentially sitting. He has been ruled out now. Jalen Brunson not playing on Tuesday as well. And so that is going to create a lot of value for us seemingly, but let's go and break that down. All right, guys, so pulling up Tyler Kolek, the best bet that we have for him is actually him to get over his fantasy score here of 27.5. This is very much predicated on the amount of minutes that he ends up getting. Okay, so he's projected to get 28 minutes. We do need him to get that. We haven't seen OG and Jalen Brunson off the court together all too much thus far this year, guys. But Kolek on a per 36 production basis averages 35 fantasy points per 36. So maybe that's something we're looking at. Points wise, he averages 16 points. So maybe his over actual points is something that we could get to. He averages only 4 rebounds, so we don't necessarily love that. Assist wise, I actually think this is a decent over bet. He averages 8 assists per 36. Now, I do want to call out when we look at his game log, guys, let's sort it by his minutes. And what we'll notice is that he's only had one game where he's gotten 28 minutes. In that game, went for about 44 fantasy points. Okay, so if he does end up getting the minutes that we're projecting him to get, I do like him to get his over fantasy score. I think that'd be the best route for him to go. And that is predicated on him, well, probably getting to his 12.5 points, but also getting some assists. And we do know he is someone that can get some steals and some blocks, mostly hoping for a steal or 2. So I do like that one. Another player that we would obviously expect to pick up a decent amount of usage and production, would be Mikal Bridges, and he was a player that we were seeing a decent prop line difference on as well. That has since been adjusted. Okay, so interesting to note there, he does average about 36 fantasy points per 36 with them off the court. So seemingly his lines are kind of already adjusted correctly. And in a weird way, I could actually see myself betting on his under points here, which is kind of what the data is telling us to do, although he's been hot recently. And maybe that's a bet that people don't like just because he's been hot. But per 36 wise, he only averages around 13.4 points per 36, which is a big drop with those two players off the court. We look at Towns. Towns actually has a 30% usage rate with those two players off the court, guys. And that's a big bump, obviously. But we are seeing a pretty big prop line difference for him as well. 44.5 on underdog, 47 on PrizePicks. Again, this is a bet that I do like the middle with. Per 36 wise, if he does end up getting close to that, projected for 33 minutes, he does average 51 points per 36. It is a game against his former team in Minnesota as well, so you kind of do expect him to be motivated to play well. In the last game against Minnesota, however, he only had 35. So definitely interesting there with some of the bets that we were getting. Then another player where we're getting a pretty big prop line difference for was with Josh Hart. Again, per 36 wise, he averages around 36 fantasy points per 36. The underdog line has him basically at 36. The PrizePicks line at 37.5. Again, the reason why I'm calling out the fantasy score lines is because they're the bets where we are seeing some edges on between one of the sites. All the other bets that we get for them are basically the same across the board. Josh Hart per 36 wise with OG and Jalen Brunson off the court for his assist is close to 7.8. So I probably wouldn't get to any of those bets there. And so kind of interesting, and just in general for this game, the lack of solid bets in general. Now, as I'm recording this video, guys, Mike Conley, we are getting some plus EV bets for. I fully expect these ones to be updated, but if they're not, you guys can take a peek at some of those and maybe get to them. Mitchell Robinson is kind of interesting to potentially get more run here as well against Minnesota, guys. Had 8 points in that game, and let's take a deeper dive into that. Did he end up playing more minutes there? No, not really, which is fascinating there. I don't hate the idea of getting to his over because Minnesota does run out Gobert, Randall, and Naz Reid, some more bigs. And so maybe with OG being out, that actually does help Mitchell Robinson get some more run. I think I can get to that. I kind of like that. And then maybe you guys like Dante DiVincenzo over 27.5 for his fantasy score. But man, not necessarily as many good edges as I was hoping for. In regards to us getting a perfect bet with those players out for New York, Jordan Clarkson per 36 wise does average 29 points per 36, but he is very much shot dependent as well. We haven't projected for 30 minutes. He's gotten 30 plus minutes a few times in those games. 24, 34, 32, 25 fantasy points. I mean, not terrible if we're looking for an over bet. I don't hate it, but also nothing too crazy there. If you were going to do that, let's take a peek at, again, the games where he's gotten a lot of minutes. 15, 24, 16, 18. I think we would just go with his over points there instead. All right, now OKC versus the Spurs, guys. For OKC, we do have a lot of players on the injury report. Chet Holmgren, we'll see if he ends up being active. Caruso, we'll see if he's active. Hardenstein, we just don't know what to expect right now. We'll take a peek at the minutes. Hardenstein probably going to play. Holmgren probably going to play based off of the projected minutes. Although I do think we are getting one pretty big edge with SGA for his fantasy score, as well as Wemby. We're getting a decent one for his fantasy score, as well as De'Aaron Fox, guys. So naturally in this game, I think we're going to get a decent stacking opportunity. These two teams are kind of in a replay for the playing game as well, which I think is a decent opportunity to bet on this game, maybe gain some edges there. Looking at the game total, 234, 5.5 point spread. So it should be a close game. And so I do want to start with some of those prop line differences that we are getting. I already mentioned with Fox, guys, this is a pretty good over bet on underdog. Him to get over 31.95. Not a big edge there, but it could end up being the difference between a bet hitting or not hitting. So might as well just get a better edge there on betting on his over on underdog rather than PrizePicks. In his last game against OKC, guys, 37 minutes in that game, was able to get the over there. And then we see these two games right here where he did not get the over. The minutes just weren't there. They didn't need to be, okay? And so, again, assuming that this game stays close, he does get 32 minutes. I do end up liking that over a decent amount there on underdog. Wemby's in for a pretty interesting spot, again, in regards to his fantasy score. A little bit too low there on underdog. In that last game against OKC, he had 21 minutes there, guys, was able to get 39.8 for his fantasy score. So if we're looking at underdog, he's basically been able to get his overs, but we do need those minutes to be there for him. And then another one, and maybe we're just looking at more of a stack here, guys, game stack, SGA. SGA is another one where his fantasy score is probably just a little bit too too low there on underdog. What I don't like here is that this PrizePicks line, we are being told to bet the under. It has about a 51% chance for him to get under 51.5 for his fantasy score, so I don't necessarily like that. Again, these two teams recently met. That was a game where SGA kind of did struggle, and maybe that's why we are seeing this prop line difference there. But I kind of would expect him to bounce back and able to have a good game. I like the over a little bit more on underdog, but definitely another one that was worth calling out to you guys. So that kind of does it for those fantasy score ones. Apologies for anyone that's watching these more for traditional sports with bets. As someone that plays mostly on PrizePicks and underdog, I know a decent amount of the audience comes from that. I can't not give people those bets. I just have to give you guys the best bets. That's how I roll. I don't think people really mind that. Castle to get over 15.5 points, another pretty interesting one, guys. We see he's been crushing this. 52.6% chance for this one hit. This is basically a perfect bet. If we wanted to get to his over fantasy score, I don't hate it, but also that one feels a little bit more correct. We put on the filter call bets, guys. If you ever wonder what an ideal bet is, it basically would be if Castle was at like a 54% likelihood for him to get the over here. Although the matchup isn't the best, DVP wise. Maybe not a perfect bet, but still one I think we should be getting to. And then from there, I don't think we necessarily need to spend any more time on that game. So let's go ahead and jump on into the last couple of games. Long video, guys. Show some love. Like the video. Just trying to give you guys the best bets possible. Obviously, looking at the Lakers here. So another pretty interesting spot, guys. We are looking at Luka to be out. Hachimura out. Reeves probably back for this game. But maybe we're getting a decent bet there with then LeBron, so we'll talk about that. And then for Phoenix, guys, Grayson Allen listed as day-to-day. Everyone else is still active that has been active for them. Looking at the game total, lower scoring game, a 6-point spread in favor of Phoenix. So here's a bet where I was really hoping we were going to get a prop line difference for between the two sides. That was with Devin Booker in regards to his fantasy score, because I do feel like his fantasy score is too low at 40.5. But really, we're probably just not needing to change anything there. I do want to take a peek at Austin Reeves and the bets we are getting for him. And so, guys, with Doncic and Hachimura off the court, Reeves does average about 3.9 rebounds per 36, so not necessarily a great bet there. Points-wise, it's kind of laughable. 40 points per 36 with them off the court. Now, he is someone that's currently questionable, does draw a good matchup. Last game against Phoenix, though, only 16. I feel like, maybe a bet that you just juice up if you want to, really bet on him to have a good game. Otherwise, I just don't want to jump in on that too much. He is someone that we were getting a prop line difference for with his fantasy score. They have since taken off some of those lines with him being questionable. That being said, we are gaining a slight prop line difference with LeBron James. Per 36 wise, he does average 60 fantasy points per 36 with those players off the court. I do think that this ends up being it's not a really big prop line difference. We were getting one earlier in the day with him between the two sites, but I don't mind the idea of getting to him for his over fantasy score. But let's talk about some of the other bets here for LeBron. Okay, so LeBron, points-wise, with those two off the court, only averages 23.3 points. And so probably not a spot that we need to get there for him. He does average 9.7 rebounds, however. And so the 6 rebounds might end up being actually a little bit too low. Maybe that's a bet where you could kind of use it as a demon bet there as well. If you guys wanted to get to him for maybe 6.5 rebounds, I don't hate that, but not necessarily a great bet. As you guys can see, not the highest likelihood, but I kind of think that's more due to, all the other data points telling us not to do that and it being a tougher matchup there. But I could see getting to that one. And then it is worth calling out, guys, Jake LaRivia is the player that kind of benefits the most minutes-wise. We see 28 projected minutes for him. He could actually end up getting a little bit more run than that. Tough matchup, though. And so I kind of feel like the bets that we were getting here, again, in this game are basically correct. We'll put on the best bets and ideal bets filters on here, see if we're getting anything worthwhile there. Colin Gillespie, under 4.5 rebounds. Not terrible, but not necessarily a great one. Also, under 5.5 points. I don't like to mess around with those lines that are too low, and we're getting some okay spots, but overall it kind of feels like we'd be forcing them. So jumping on into another game here, guys. 2 more. All right, so Memphis, guys, they're still without a lot of players, and then Utah, we'll see if Kevin Love ends up being active in this game. This is another pretty high scoring game, but it's a close game, so we like that there. And I'm just going to keep the filters on here once again, guys. Ace Bailey for over his points is not a terrible one. 13.5 points in the last game last night. Did not get there. Played 34 minutes. Did not really shoot the basketball well. Pretty poor from three ball. He's someone that you kind of would expect to do better. And in a game stack, I actually don't hate the idea of getting to that over. Yusuf Nurkic on the back end of back-to-back. I do wonder how many minutes he ends up getting here tonight. I think it could end up being less, especially if someone like Kevin Love is back. And so if you think Kevin Love could potentially be back, maybe not a terrible bet to get to. Isaiah Collier for under 7.5 assists is kind of an interesting one. 52% chance for that one to hit. He is someone that kind of got his normal minutes last night in a game that was a blowout. Didn't exactly shoot the basketball all too well. And he's actually someone that last night barely burnt us, not getting his over fantasy score. And so I actually want to take a peek. Are we getting him again for fantasy score at all just yet? No. But if we were, I think we could potentially look at his over fantasy score. Just be on the lookout for that. If his line's at about like 22 for his fantasy score, I do like the over. He is someone that did get some steals. And with him getting assists, that I think his fantasy score is really the only one we want to get to. Keontae George, we were seeing a decent prop line difference for his fantasy score between the two sites. Underdog at 42, PrizePicks at 40. He is someone that was on a little bit of a hot streak there. Again, in the game stack, I actually don't hate the idea of getting to this over. If he does get 33 or more minutes, I kind of like the over actually there. But that's, again, just a bet on this game staying close and it being that high scoring. I'm actually surprised we're not getting any better spots just in general here. Jalen Wells for Memphis, 24. I don't hate it. Last game against Utah, 27.5 for his fantasy score, 51% chance for that to hit. Projected for 27 minutes. I could see that being more. Just again, maybe in the game stack we get to that one. But I don't want to spend too much time on that because we have a couple more games to get into, guys. Detroit versus the Kings. 8.5 point spread in favor of Detroit. Kind of a lower scoring game. Zach LaVine is still out. You also have Sabonis still out. Just take a quick peek at some of these bets because the video is getting a little bit too long here. Apologies for that. Can't really control that though. We're just going to do the filter call bets here for the last couple of games here, just to speed it up a little bit. Cade Cunningham under 9.5 assists is a bet that's popping up here, guys. I would assume that's a little bit predicated on him maybe not getting as many minutes as maybe he was projected to get. Clifford for under 7.5 points. Don't hate it going against Detroit, although it is a little bit of a better matchup for him. Only projected for 17 minutes. Kind of interesting there. Jalen Duren to get over his points is a little bit interesting. 17.5. None of these actually seem like bets I need to get to. Duncan Robinson, I mean, maybe. But also, again, kind of feels like we don't need to get there projected for 27 minutes. Yeah, let's just jump on into the next game, guys. Portland versus Orlando. So Orlando is still missing a lot of players, guys, and then Portland as well. Still pretty banged up. The biggest question mark that we have with Portland is whether or not Jeremy Grant is going to be active. If he sits, Sharp does benefit. And actually, Sharp is one of the players that I like. On Underdog, again, given a prop line difference that we were getting, guys, him at 34.65. I do like the over there. We do see that could really end up mattering because he's gotten the over 3 out of his last 5 games at that underdog line, but he's gotten the under in 3 out of the 5 games as well. So very interesting there. Now, this is a close game, and so we haven't projected for 31 minutes. Could end up maybe getting a little bit more than that. It is a more difficult matchup, though, against Orlando, so we don't necessarily love that, but I do think that ends up being a pretty decent middle bet overall. We are noticing that his over points here of 23.5 is a somewhat interesting bet. Same thing with his points and assists, both very close sweats, and so that's kind of what you would expect, but did want to call that out. And then from there, we are getting a plus EV bet for Jeremy Grant to get under 1.5 blocks and steals. You guys know, we just trust Vegas at that point. We can click on that bet and get to it if it's still there. And then from there, yes, I'll just put back on the filter call bets. We are getting a decent amount. Denny Avdia for under 7.5 rebounds. Really not terrible. Richardson for under 9.5 points. I mean, currently I'm projected for 6 minutes. It probably will be more than that with everyone being out like it has been the last couple of games. But I guess I wouldn't be surprised if it switches at all. If he gets anything less than 22 or 20 plus minutes, you kind of would expect him to get that under. I don't hate the idea of getting to that one. That's a pretty interesting one there. Desmond Bane under 4.5 rebounds. I don't know, guys. Per 36 wise, with those players off the court, he actually averages that over. So not necessarily one I love. With it being, I don't want to say a lower scoring game, but also kind of a lower scoring game for Portland. I could see Denny Avdia getting under 25.5 points. Ben Caro, Yeah, I'm probably not touching that. This bet's around correct when you look at the per 36 production with all those players off the court. Bane has been kind of interesting there as well. So maybe just Jace and then also that Jeremy Grant one. And finally, guys, the last game of the night, we got Houston versus the Clippers. Houston, we're seeing a lot of minutes lowered here in this game. And I would assume that's pretty much due to their matchup there with the Clippers. I do have the filter still on. We are getting plenty of like decent overall bets here, like Reed Shepherd to get under 3 rebounds. I don't know I don't necessarily want to mess with that. Brook Lopez to get under his points, rebounds, and assists. He is projected for 23 minutes. If he gets less than that, obviously he would probably not get the over. Jabari Smith, that's a tough click, isn't it? We see his game log here, guys, for him to get under 23.5 points, rebounds, and assists. All the data points are basically telling us to bet on the under due to matchup, due to the blowout risk, and due to the lower scoring game. But the fact that he's gotten this over across the board, when we look at the splits, I don't know, that's a tough one. Probably staying away from that. Really not much here overall. KD, I kind of like his game log here against the Clippers last time out, only 20 PRA. So let's actually take a peek at some of the fantasy score bets here as well, because with Kevin Durant, we were getting a little bit of a prop line difference. So let's start with him. So on underdog, guys, yeah, it was at like 36. So that's off by 2. I kind of like the over there. He's been someone that has been playing well recently. I think we could kind of ride the hot hand there. 4 straight games again, the over. We don't like the fact that in the last game against the Clippers did not get the over, but still, I think we end up getting to that one. And then, yeah, again, guys, Kennard here. We are seeing a little bit of a prop line difference for him between the two sites. I'm looking at the table view. I toggled that on. This one's tough. He has, again, if you look at the middle, he has gotten the over on underdog 3 out of the last 5 games. But on PrizePicks, using their line, he's gotten the under 3 out of the past 5 games. So definitely a middle bet. We shouldn't be getting that big line difference there. Don't hate it. Don't love it, though. Eamon Thompson, we are seeing a little bit of a prop line difference for as well. I probably like the over a little bit more so on underdog. Pretty appealing there. Just, again, a green across the board if you use the underdog line. We look at the overview tab. Yeah, honestly, let's get to that underdog bet. That actually is pretty darn appealing. Off by 2. Yeah, I'd be a little bit sad if that doesn't. If you want to run that out as a middle, you can. And then Sengun a little bit there as well. Don't necessarily need to get to Sengun, but again, probably just a little bit too low with his underdog line. It's pretty crazy. So some pretty decent game stacks here. I hate like saying that, but those should really be the bets of the day. It's just betting on games to maybe stay a little bit closer. Like this game, you want to stay close, but we're getting plenty. It's obviously a massive slate. I think that's a decent route to go, is do a lot of these game stacks. And so with that, guys, getting into the bet of the day here for PrizePicks. Again, I like some of these bets. A little bit of them are based off of the projected minutes. We are getting plenty of other edges, though, that we can get to on the slate. These are more bets that I wanted to call out because we aren't getting those big prop line differences, because that's exactly what the underdog bet slip is going to be. It's just calling out those big prop line differences. So kind of more traditional sports bets here, but overall, I think we're getting some good edges here. And then, guys, for underdog, we are getting some pretty big prop line differences. Again, I kind of think that's the side I like a little bit more as underdog today, especially because we do have some gain stacking opportunities. Like we're kind of just hoping this game stays close. I like Wemby and Fox. You could also get to SGA for over his fantasy score there. I don't hate that. Again, a decent stack. I do like Shady on Sharp to get over his fantasy score a little bit more on PrizePicks or on underdog rather than betting on the under on PrizePicks. But again, all these are pretty significant prop line differences today. Again, if I had to choose like one specifically that I really like, Eamon Thompson, but I've already got way too many bets in today. The Kobe White and Jalen Williams bets have somewhat gone bumped as I was recording this video. Hopefully not too much, but that's going to do it, guys. Appreciate you being here. If you guys would like access to that tool that I just showed you guys, plus a bunch of other ones, guys, we've been adding to college basketball, NBA Optimizer, Dabble, NBA Optimizer, Pick 6 is coming in soon as well. And then we got the Underdog Optimizer. Pick 6 is in there right now as well, guys. So lots of updates have been made. All available for a low monthly cost of $10 a month. Head on over to 9to5sports.com to get access to those tools. Appreciate you guys being here. Good luck. And as always, let's keep cashing.